Hello, everyone. I'm Jake with Real Estate, your host. I'm excited to share with you one of our locals, Mike Wood. He's going to be our go-to person when it comes to multi-family rental property. I'm really excited to talk to you today. Thank you for giving me time.
Glad to be here, man. Appreciate it.
So the first question that I think our viewers would really want to know is, what is that one thing, if you're thinking about getting into rental property, what is that one thing that you think they should walk away after watching the show that they need to know?
No, one thing. Can I say one thing with 28 parts? I mean, the one thing is what's worked for me is to build a relationship with your banker. If you've got to understand that, first of all, the person that you do your checking account with, or your savings, or who you're making deposits with, whatever, at your local bank, that's not who you're going to be dealing with. You're going to be dealing with what's called the commercial lending side. Even if you're going to buy a normal family rental property, that's still commercial lending to the bank. Okay. So you have to build that relationship with a banker. And I tell everybody, be as open with the banker as you can. Don't hide a thing, and walk in there with a well-formulated business plan.
Okay. I think that's great. Lots of options to choose from as far as credible lenders. And I think that's right. You got to take the time to put a plan together and approach them the right way. You can't just walk in there last minute and say, I need a bunch of money, and you don't have a plan. You really need to approach them and show them why you need this and how it's going to be a best fit for this business partnership.
Well, I want to let people know that when I say the word plan, I don't want people to get overwhelmed and go, oh my gosh, I've never written a business plan, blah, blah, blah. It's not that difficult. What happened with me, a friend of mine and I were building a deck back in 2006. I was helping him at his house, and my job was to carry the heavy stuff. Okay. I don't build, but I do carry heavy stuff. And when we were done, we were enjoying a beverage on his deck. And I said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to buy some rental property. That conversation turned into a conversation with a banker at lunch that we paid for. We cultivated that relationship and business plan recommendation. So we went back, and here was our brilliant business plan. We were going to buy 2 houses a year for 10 years, let them appreciate. And then we were going to sell 2 houses a year for 10 years. And after 20 years, we were going to have taken advantage of all that equity that we built up.
Okay.
And that was the plan. They absolutely loved it. And we abandoned that plan within the first month, and no one really cared.
Really? So yeah. two rental properties a year.
That's what our original plan was.
Okay.
And again, the point was we didn't want too much risk, and we figured we could make those cash flow, a couple of $100s a month each. That wasn't our main concern because we were both still fully employed, full-time employees. So the cash flow wasn't our main thing. Building up equity so that when we sold them, we would have a pretty big cash hit. That was our goal at the time.
So if you're a viewer and you're thinking that along the same lines, you want 2 rental properties a year, and say they have a good business plan and they get involved and they start to hit those obstacles that they didn't plan for, what would you say is a good moment for them to stop and reevaluate, and it's okay to change your original plan?
Well, we changed our original plan pretty quickly, and part of it was we got buy a house fever, if there is such a thing. We bought our first one. The numbers worked out, and I'm going to recommend to anybody, know your numbers. Understand what you're paying for principal and interest. Understand the taxes. Understand the insurance. Don't go in assuming too much. Make those phone calls. People that work in those industries, they want to help you. There's tons of information available online. Everybody knows that. A favorite site of mine is Act Data Scout. If you know how to navigate that particular website, there's a free side to it. You can always pay and get more information, but I've never needed to do that. The free side gives you plenty of information. You can learn a ton about the house. You can learn who owns it, how much they paid for it, when they bought it, the taxes on it, any assessments. I mean, you just understand what's going on with the property. So now you know your principal, your interest, your taxes, and make a phone call to any of the great insurance agents here in this area and understand what your insurance is going to be. Then set aside a decent amount of money each month for maintenance, because things are going to come up 5 or 10% a month on each property in terms of what you're spending on your payment. Setting that aside for maintenance. When that hot water heater goes out, you're going to be glad you did.
That's a great point, Mike. I also agree that a monthly budget, especially separated from your personal finances, is a great way to do business. It's important to understand that each month you have to know where your money's going, and you got to calculate your profit So that way, if you do have an expense, you have it covered.
Cash flow. I did everything off of spreadsheets for 5 or 10 years, 10 years plus. And going on year 16, or excuse me, 18 right now. And we being my wife and I, we switched over to an accounting software package. We just happened to use QuickBooks. That was the most handy one. And that's who our accountant is an expert in. And we didn't even need an accountant until time progressed and we had too much for me to crunch numbers on, or actually I'd rather have spent my time finding other deals, finding other homes, and let accountants do what they get paid for. And don't hesitate to pay an expert, because the money you spend with an expert is usually well worth every nickel. It's not that I don't cringe when I write that check, but it's worth every nickel because I make it back by getting other deals going and having more money coming in than's going out. You don't have just a standard pie and you're trying to make thinner and thinner slices. I think the pie keeps getting bigger. And just because you're sharing a piece of information and sharing knowledge doesn't mean you're cutting yourself out from something. Again, the pie gets bigger, your piece can get bigger, and other people can enjoy some of the same things you enjoy.
Absolutely. That's a great question. Let's move on to question number 2. Can you really just go into a little detail on what you look for to make sure that you're cash flowing, as you spoke of earlier?
So I used to have a real simple formula. And what I've seen happen in the last year and a half or so when interest rates have started climbing is I've had to adjust my formula. My formula used to be, and I'll just speak in round general numbers. If I spent $80,000 on a house, I needed $800 a month. My 1% formula. Okay. If I was getting 1% of the purchase price on monthly rent, I was 99.9% sure that it was going to be cash flowing adequately. Okay. What has happened with an increase in interest rates, materials have gone up to repair things. Everything is kind of in the last few years, and it's no big secret, inflation has hit. I've had to bump that number up to about 1.5%. And so that's the first number I go through. And if in my head, I'm blessed that I've got that ability to kind of do numbers on the fly. If you can't do numbers on the fly, carry that phone. It's got a calculator on it. All right. Know your numbers. Get a good interest rate calculator app on your phone for a loan calculator where you can plug in numbers. That relationship you built with the banker, know what your rate is going to be. So you're not guessing, because people have this habit of underestimating what it's going to cost them. And then when the real bill comes, it's higher. So the better you can get at bridging that gap between a lowball estimate and what it's really going to cost you, the happier you're going to be.
Would you say for the average people, since this can be a process and can take some time, would you agree that getting pre-approved or going to talk to your banker and seeing how much equity you can pull from your resources before you start shopping?
Well, absolutely. That's that relationship that I talked about. And you mentioned probably the absolute key word in this whole thing, and that absolute key word is equity. Okay? Equity in terms of lending is just another word for collateral. Okay? Over the years, I've done some very creative things, or creative to me. Everyone's done them eventually, or has done these things eventually, but it was creative to me at the time. I've taken a title to a paid off car. The car was worth $10,000 or $12,000. The bank is looking to have a 15% equity stake. So when you have 100 divided by 15, that means every equity dollar is worth about 6.67 times that. So when I got a $10,000 car, that's worth a $66,700 house. Okay. Then when you start to, if you buy or sell a couple, you get a little money in the bank. Maybe you're blessed to have saved up and you have a CD in the bank. Maybe you have a $200,000 house that you only owe $100,000 on. The bank will take a portion of that and say you can use that as equity and not be any cash out of pocket. And that is the thing that I've been the happiest about over the last 18 years. I've never been cash out of pocket to buy a house.
You've always found something that has that 15% equity that you can use as collateral.
And one step further than that, I've never went to a closing where I had to pay money.
Okay.
And and why? Because I've had that conversation with the banker of saying, what can I do? how can I structure this? I've got relationships with title agents. Those are some smart people. I listen to what they have to say in terms of how I can structure to not be cash out of pocket.
And all this is transpired before the actual deal is done.
Yes.
So you basically went to the experts in their fields. You asked the right questions, and you got the information you needed to make the informed decision.
And was willing to learn.
Okay.
And here's the other thing that happens. Sometimes when you're talking to an expert, they'll use terminology and it's second nature to them, and you have no idea what it is. Don't pretend like you do. Stop and ask the question and say, hey, you said equity. Explain what you mean by equity, and that's where I get the word collateral. Okay, to me, it's more like collateral. I'm using my equity as collateral. So I kind of think of those two words interchangeably. But when a banker starts talking about cap rate, they start talking about how they calculate this and how they want the numbers to balance out. Don't just sit there and nod your head and go, oh yeah. Go, whoa, time out. Can you show me an example on paper? And let's write one down, and then I can plug in different numbers, and the formula remains the same. It's just different numbers.
It's explained in a method that you understand.
Correct.
Okay.
Don't hesitate to ask. Again, they're experts.
Yeah, so check your ego, be willing to ask questions and clarify, and make sure that you understand what exactly you need to do to get the best rate possible.
Yeah, and not every deal that I've done or had over the last 18 years. I had a business partner early on, and we worked together at FedEx, and what a great relationship we had in business, and what a great relationship we still have. Shout out to Bill Knipe. Great guy, friend, mentor still to this day. And he and I, the only times we really got in trouble is when we didn't check our ego at the door. So not every deal was perfect. We had some deals that we thought were going to cash flow $200 a month and still build equity, ended up cash flowing $100 a month. And sometimes that juice isn't worth the squeeze. Because when you're cash flowing just that little bit, one water heater, one HVAC system, holy cow, it goes bad. If you're not prepared for that, it can get you in trouble.
So it's safe to say, after I heard what you said, you need to approach each deal on a case-by-case basis. You can't just assume it's a great deal like the one before. You need to do the math. You need to stick to your 1 or 1.5% rule. Yeah. And you need to make sure you get the trusted advice from the experts, the tax rate, the loan amount, what loan's best for the situation, to make sure that that particular property that you're buying right now is worth it.
Apply your formula, but tweak the heck out of it and just know what the numbers are going to be. Like right now, I've gotten to the point, I don't do as many as I used to because now I spend more time managing and tightening up things and trying to optimize the cash flow out of the portfolio of a property that my wife and I have. We've got a mixture that's almost all residential. I got 4 commercial rentals, but everything else is residential. Of that, there's apartment, there's multifamily, 4-plex, 5-plex, few duplexes, and then the rest is just your single family houses. And I'm tweaking and optimizing and trying to make sure I keep as close as I can to a 90-95% rental rate, keep people in there. One good piece of advice is waiting an extra month or two for a good renter is way better than getting a questionable renter in almost immediately because you're going to end up regretting it. Okay. They're going to cost you more than you're pulling in.
Speaking of renters, I think that brings us to my next question. What kind of contract would you recommend, or what contract have you used that protects you and gives you that cushion legally if you need it?
I use the state of Arkansas's approved lease. Okay. It's a little longer than I'd like it to be. It's 8 or 9 pages long. I tell people as we're going through it, I stress that it's the state of Arkansas's lease. There's a certain degree of confidence that comes with that because I'm just not adding stuff to it willy-nilly that, is in my favor. Okay. I'm going to go back a little bit and say that I don't rent or sell anything I wouldn't live in. State of Arkansas's lease, you can Google that, state of Arkansas lease, put it on PDF and print it out. And as I'm reading through it and as I'm filling it out with tenants, read through it as much as they want. But the key parts of it is, how much is it? When do you owe it? What's the penalty if you're not paying it on time? And what's the term of the lease? and what is the expectation in terms of keeping the property maintained, cleaned, maintained. I always tell people, this is not an apartment complex. You're renting a house, and I'm not going to come over here and mow it for you. You're telling me you love yard work. Most people say that. You don't find very many people that do, but most people say it. But you say you love yard work, please don't make me drive by and see the grass 10 inches tall and I got to make a phone call. Neither one of us is going to like that.
Understandable. So you're consistent, but you're upfront and honest with your tenants, and you basically cover the state of Arkansas tenants lease with it.
That's the lease that I use. People use different ones, and there is a landlord association in town, and I'd recommend membership in that.
Okay.
Even if you only have one or two, you're going to come across people that have a dozen. You're going to come across people that have 100, and they have all the same experiences, and they've all made mistakes that they can help you avoid making. How do you do that? Well, ask your banker. Say, here's what I'm thinking. Here's my understanding of how much equity or collateral I would need to do that. Here's what I believe it's going to be worth. And what they'll typically do is they'll get their in-house appraiser to go over there. You'll give them a list of all the things you're going to do. I'm going to put a new front door. I'm going to add shutters. I'm going to fix all the gutter outside. I'm going to re-landscape the front and give it tremendous curb appeal. Let me show you this picture of the kitchen and the new countertop that I'm going to buy for the kitchen. This bathroom, oh my goodness, here's what I'm going to do in here. And by the way, ignore all that ugly paint you see inside. I'm painting the entire interior, and I think everything's going to cost me $15,000. So I'm going to have $95,000 in it. What do you believe it would appraise for after the fact? They'll get their in-house appraiser involved. It's going to appraise for $120 to be completed. Well, okay. And then all of a sudden, here's another secret. Your collateral that you have against that $95,000 that you borrowed on that $80,000 house. Again, you don't want to be out of pocket. Okay. That collateral, instead of having to stick with that house forever, after 1 year, you get the house officially appraised, and that value, you see if the house will stand on its own. Because if it's at 120, which it should be, could be, okay, and you only owe 90, 95, whatever it is you owe after you've made some payments, all of a sudden that house has its own collateral, and it carries itself. And you have freed up that one piece of collateral to go do another house with.
Understand. I'm just curious now. You're talking from experience here. How many times would you say in the last 18 years you've done that?
40.
40 times?
At least.
So right now, how many properties would you say that you're sitting on in here in the local area?
I call them doors.
Okay.
Rentals that I am collecting 89.
Okay. So 89 different property doors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is that including some of your multifamily?
That is. So one physical address could be 4 doors.
Okay. Makes sense. So you have a lot of experience in this field, and your biggest tips, if I can recant, is making sure that you get the information from the trusted sources. Make sure you clarify if you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that you go to the trusted people if you have questions. Don't be afraid to look for collateral where you can.
Mm-hmm. And you get creative with that. I've done houses, I've done cars, I've used CDs, I've done a little bit of everything to use for collateral.
Mike, that's some wonderful information. I'm excited. The tips, I'm going to take some of those and apply. And of course, I hope if you're getting into the rental property business that you reach out. If you have questions, let me know. We're glad to get the answers to you. And I hope we give you the information today so you can go build your future your way.